Hey, what's up? My name is Aaron Castellanos. For my video project, I'm going to be covering David Lowery's 2021 fantasy film, The Green Knight. I'm more specifically going to be covering the end of his film, and I'm going to be connecting that to our reading of Albert Camus' The Myth of Sisyphus. Both of these pieces of work really dive into the meaning of life. More specifically, they dive into the meaning of life in the face of death, and that's what I'm going to be going over today. In The Green Knight, our main protagonist is Sir Gawain. He starts out as King Arthur's nephew. He really isn't anything yet. He doesn't have an honor, and he's not a knight yet. Until one Christmas day, a Green Knight shows up at Camelot, and he basically offers up a bet. He goes, if you give a blow to me, I'll return a blow to you in a year's worth time. Sir Gawain jumps at this opportunity. He jumps into it naively. He doesn't know what's going to happen, but he jumps on it to half story to prove himself to his uncle. So when he does this, he cuts off the Green Knight's head. The Green Knight picks up his head, says 1 year's time, and leaves. So a year goes by, and Gawain sets out on his adventure to go and meet the Green Knight at the Green Chapel to get the blow returned. Through this quest, he learns so much. He basically learns the different honors and 7 arms that it means to be a knight. He learns honor, love, and everything in between. In Albert Camus' The Myth of Sisyphus, he uses Sisyphus as an allegory to show the meaning of life and happiness. The Sisyphus has to roll a ball up a hill for it to eternally roll back down. But Camus argues that he doesn't find happiness and he doesn't find the meaning of life in the act of doing it. He finds the meaning of life in the acceptance of doing it. It's not externally doing it. It's finding the acceptance of doing this task and having it mean something to you. So that's what he argues, and that's the basis of what I'm going to be arguing for Gawain's journey. To set the scene, at the end of the film, Sir Gawain meets the Green Knight at his chapel. He kneels in front of him, and the Green Knight raises his axe. Sir Gawain is confused by this. He asks if there's anything more, and the Green Knight doesn't say anything. So, in an act of cowardice, he gets up and runs away. In this, we see a montage of him returning to Camelot. He's seen as this magnificent knight. He becomes the king of Camelot when King Arthur dies. He has the hand of a new wife, and he has a daughter, and he sits as king. But the kingdom gets overthrown, and we see his wife and his child flee from these enemies. And at the very end, we see Sir Gawain take off his staff that is supposed to protect him from the Green Knight. And when he takes off his staff, his head falls off. So in this, we learn that he doesn't face death. He doesn't accept death. And in that, death follows him. And death returns to him whenever he expects it. And he lives life without any honor. But we return back to the Green Chapel, and Sir Gawain is still kneeling in front of the Green Knight. We find out that this is simply just a montage. And the Green Knight stands above him with his axe, and Sir Gawain stops him. He takes off his green stash, and he takes off his magical thing that was supposed to protect him, and accepts death. This is huge. This is the first time that Sir Gawain lives with honor, and lives with authenticity, and accepts death. The Green Knight kneels down and says,
"Well done, my brave knight."
It's huge. This is the first time that Gawain lives with honor. He accepts it. And in that, the film ends with the title, and that's all we get. In this scene, Gawain's act of pure confidence and courageousness doesn't see any external validation. It's purely on acceptance. Now, this is what Albert Camus preaches about. This is his argument. In The Myth of Sisyphus, Sisyphus has to accept the fact that he is gonna roll this boulder up for the rest of his life. That sucks. It's not fun. But in the acceptance, he is rebelling against the thing that he is put up against. In this, Camus calls it the absurd. He rebels against the absurd, and in that he finds the meaning of life in the acceptance of doing something no matter what and choosing happiness rather than having it from an external validation or the act of doing it. This moment becomes less about achieving glory, which was his original plan, but more about finding self-acceptance and finding peace within oneself and finding honor within oneself by accepting things as they are. By rejecting escapism and accepting responsibility, both of these characters can now live with a form of freedom that you wouldn't originally get from the acts that they are doing. In this film and the reading, both Sir Gawain and Sisyphus choose to accept life's absurdity, and they choose to rebel against it, which is exactly what Albert Camus argues for. To end this video out, I just want to speak on how both of these pieces of work affected me personally, and they affected my point of view, not only when it comes to philosophy, but also when it comes to art. I watched this movie, I believe, at the beginning of my sophomore or junior year of high school, so I was pretty young still and kind of still looking at what kind of movies I like. But for some reason, it stuck with me, and it didn't get a lot of recognition. So immediately after I got out of it, I looked for video essays and I looked for ways to understand this film, and it went all the way to me actually going and buying the book and reading the entire original poem so I could better understand this movie. And then after it, I kept coming back. I kept trying to figure out. I feel like it's so in your face, but there's so many little things that David Lowery hints at and puts in this film that you really sit with for a long time. And even though the themes of the movie and the message of the movie are so blatantly obvious, there are still a lot of little things that you come back to, which I think is beautiful. And not only is it shot beautifully, it's written beautifully, and the acting is phenomenal. And as for Camus, his work has influenced me so much in not only my work, but also just my life and how I approach different things. His act of rebellion and his almost pessimistic take on life and what to do is so inspiring, and I feel so fresh. I feel like we get a lot of philosophy that's oh, death, live. But his is different. It's an act of rebellion, and in that act of rebellion, it gives me a form of freedom and a form of strength and a form of acceptance that no other philosophy has ever given me before. And it works so well with this film that it's not about any external validation. It's not about any external thing. No one's going to save you. It's not some decree that's going to come and help you. It's about your acceptance, and it's about the acceptance within oneself to face life. And it's the acceptance that life is bad and life does suck, and you can't really know what's going to happen, but you accept that responsibility. And in that acceptance and in that responsibility, you can start to choose to find happiness, and you could really find your meaning of life there. And I think that's why both this film and that book is so powerful, and that's why I recommend it to everyone. So if you haven't read this book or you haven't watched this movie, I recommend doing them together because they work so well together and they're just beautiful pieces of art. So thank you, and that's my video project.